This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere.
Hi, this is Julie, and I am here with Susan, and we are starting our new Ancient Texts podcast on Neville Goddard. And in this podcast, we are going to look at the power of awareness. And I'd actually like to take a little detour in the beginning here to say that Neville Goddard, if you don't know, and a lot of people do know who he is, he was one of the 1950s New Thought teachers. And he's written a huge amount of things. You can find basically all his stuff online.
Yep.
You can also, buy the books, whatever, wherever they are. Yet, as a resource, he's a wonderfully intense resource, and we used some of his wisdom in our Blue Book of Energy, Energetic Invocations, a book of vibrational change, and we talked about how he basically traveled in time and used time, and it was actually in the time section, one of my favorites.
Yep.
And he did that to change the diagnosis of clients and to help them heal. And, we were fascinated by that. And Neville Goddard is definitely an intense person to be fascinated by what thought and what awareness and what energy he was in. And so at first we're going to look at the power of awareness. And I think to start out, right in the beginning, it's perfect the way he sets it up, because it says, this book is to reveal your infinite power, against which no earthly force is of the slightest significance. It is to show you who you are, your purpose, and your destiny. Ooh, that excites me.
Me too.
And hopefully it excites you too, and that's why you're here with us for this journey in our Ancient Text podcast as we continue on. And we're actually going to look as much as we can chapter to chapter, as much as the conversation and the energy carries us forward. So let's have some fun. We're going to look at chapter 1, I Am.
Julie and I sat down and tried to figure out the best way to go about talking about the book, because it's so deep. And it's almost like every chapter could be a podcast. But
right.
we're going to try not to do that, because you could just go so deep and then look at it again and go deeper. But the part that it talks about I am, and when I read this, sometimes I have to read out loud, because one of the things that he says, he says, I am is the self-definition of the absolute, the foundation on which everything rests. I am is the first cause substance. I am is the self-definition of God. So, when I first looked at that, I'm like, okay, cause substance, which is really what we're more used to hearing, cause and effect. But it's interesting that he uses cause and then substance, because that implies manifestation. It implies the thought and then the manifestation, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I kept going back. I'm like, am I reading this correct? Because that is normally, we say cause and effect.
Right.
And so then the other part he wrote is, I am hath sent me unto you. I am that I am. Be still and know that I am God. And what's interesting, what I had to read, is the middle line, which says, I am that I am. Meaning, I'm that I am. And I pointed.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like, what does he mean, I am that I am? So it's one of those you have to read out loud. And, and I find it interesting, because sometimes even with our own book, sometimes when I read it, it still isn't powerful enough of what we wanted to say. So that's when I look at it, I'm like, I kind of cringe, because it says what I want, but the emphasis, it's almost like in a foreign language, they have the little accent that you can, highlight the what you really want to emphasize. And sometimes, you can't do it. And you have to hope that the reader picks that up, because that statement, I am that I am. I am, as he's talking about, which is consciousness, which is the next part of the chapter that I really want to delve into more. And by saying I am that I am, he's acknowledging that we, each individual, are a part of the I am that exists in everything.
Right, as all.
Yes.
As all. And I like the way he kind of gives us a clue by saying, the concept of how you define yourself and the concept of who you are is virtually irrelevant, because the basic knowledge and core is that I am, and we are all I am. Mm-hmm. And as odd as that sounds, it just takes you to the unique power and awareness that saying I am takes you to.
And I think that's important to realize, but the fun part is, he goes in further. It's, you can then start defining, I'm a man, he's a man, so I am a man, I am a father, I am an American. He says, you are not defining different I ams, you are defining different concepts or arrangements of the one cause substance, the one I am, which is saying that you still can be, I am giving a podcast, I'm a podcaster, I am a writer. That doesn't mean that you're not the all I am, but this is when it gets fun.
Right.
You can define, what do you want to do? And it can change. Some people, I think it's a big thing with people going to college. Well, what do I want to be? What do I want to be? It's what are you talking about? You're going to change all the time. I am something today, maybe tomorrow I'll be something else. And that's the fun of this, but at the core is that it doesn't change the fact. And it's funny because he talks about the I am changing, because you kind of rearrange certain causes to create the substance of what you become.
Right. And that's really cool, because in essence, I am is the totality of who you are. And yet, when you go into a concept or you try to divide it, which is exactly what you just stated, when you go into that concept, you're just ascertaining a limited aspect of I am. And so if you kind of falter into that and you lose your awareness that you're in that limitation, you're still I am. You're still connected to the totality of I am. You're just not being aware of it. And you're operating in that limited aspect.
And that's one side of it. The other side of it is what he says here. He says, he's talking about if a man's concept of himself were different than his original concept, everything in his world would be different. His concept of himself being what it is, everything in his world must be as it is. So you're talking about if you don't have awareness, you lose sight that you're part of it all. And the other side of it is you also lose sight that you're creating the what you are, and that's creating your world. So It's a double-sided sword, you don't get one and you miss a huge part of the other thing, which I keep thinking a little bit of life, that's the point of life, is having fun. What do you want to do with it?
So before we segue into from I am into consciousness, there's a great paragraph that I'm actually going to read from in Neville Goddard's book, The Power of Awareness. When you know that consciousness is the one and only reality, conceiving itself to be something good, bad, or indifferent, and becoming that which it conceived itself to be, you are free from the tyranny of second causes, free from the belief that there are causes outside of your own mind that can affect your life. And this is really cool to segue from that energy into chapter 2, consciousness, because it becomes the question that you've been, kind of dying to ask, what is consciousness?
Right. Well, we talk about energy, and we talk that energy is not good energy, it's not bad energy, it's just energy, and it's what you choose to do with it. Whether you choose embracing it and go into a negative thought mode or go into a positive thought mode, or even someone else's thought mode doesn't have to affect you if you're just in the essence of it's just energy.
Right.
And so if we say that, it's interesting because consciousness is such a overused term, and I don't mean overused, that it's just like such a standard term, like no one ever really thinks about what it is. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, because if you have any experience and everyone says, I know what consciousness is, and it's unconscious, then you throw in, Jung's unconscious and then subconscious. And then if you go into that to me is a fascinating, and I don't want to, and I think that maybe for me, it gets caught up in the vocabulary, and I don't really want to so much get caught up in it. But as I read this chapter, I had a different idea of it. So
we're talking about consciousness, and we're obviously, doing all these versions of all our different 4 podcasts on energy when we're talking about energy. And so, there's the understanding that consciousness is really all there is. And if that's the understanding, there's an energy basis to that, yet of course, you like to go into this because I like to go into the energy part, but there's also a physical basis to that. And in that realm, it's beautiful. In this first chapter, in the second paragraph, he says, nothing has existence for man save through the consciousness he has of it. And so your consciousness is really alchemizing the thought, the imagination, the vibration into a physical form, which is amazing. Which then, creates the understanding. I'm going to go way off here, that, we all have this power. We all have this ability because I am. If we go back to chapter 1, we're all in that connection. We all come of that vibration. So when you take the magnitude of consciousness and, how you can change your concept of yourself just by the awareness of consciousness, and I like to go to that level of, it's kind of funny because you're using your mind to think about your mind. And so, how much can you burn yourself with that, and how much can you propel with that? And, how much can you be addicted to that, And consciousness, for man to use consciousness to actually create the existence, is beautiful. It's not only a tool, it's a presence, it's a state of who you are, it's a state of how everything is. It's all, once again.
And it's funny because he states that consciousness is the only reality, and he defines consciousness as that initial I am. And I find it interesting how he defines consciousness, because his definition of consciousness really doesn't have a definition. I am. It's not I am happy, I am sad. It's just I am.
Right.
And I find that interesting. And he also says we access consciousness through our concept of ourselves, and therefore it manifests around us.
And so, it goes right into the Kabbalion. It goes right into... hand in hand in that sense. And he also has he refers to the Bible. Right.
He has a biblical passage in here that is kind of funny because it ties to the whole Norman Vincent Peale.
Right. And also Joseph Murphy.
Yes.
And also, it ties into everyone of that time period, of that era. And, another little 2 sentences from that chapter, he really gives us the visual here that can kind of make your mind go, what? Because he says, nature then as a thing or a complex of things external to your mind must be rejected.
Right.
You and your environment cannot be regarded as existing separately. You and your world are one.
Right.
And so the beauty of that becomes, you can no longer look outside and go, they're doing this to me. That's like, having your hand slap your face over and over. Why is that occurring? Well, you're doing it.
That whole idea, if, you have an illness, and if you can never see yourself in any state other than that illness, how is it ever going to manifest?
Right.
It will never manifest. And that goes for anything, is can you see yourself in a certain way? If you can't see yourself in a certain way, I don't care what happens out there, it will never appear that way to you. Even if in a crazy twist of fate, the world tries to show you a way that it could occur, you would never even see it.
Right.
You'd miss it.
Right. So the mirror image of that, he continues in this chapter, which aligns with that, yet it's the mirror image, because you want to go, he says, this is actually, I'm reading from the end part of a sentence, he said, your mind is always arranged in the image of all you believe and consent to as true. So if your mind is arranged in that, and it's producing that, and you're feeding it what you consent to as true, could be from the outside that you're consenting to, as well as what you're consenting in your own beliefs. I mean, it's really you who's screwing it up if you feel like it's being screwed up. It's really you who's creating all that's beautiful if you feel like it's beautiful.
So I have a question. Because this is, of course, where I go. So you have the you that's physical, that appears as though you're here, that everyone thinks you are what you've manifested. And then you have consciousness, which is we're saying is everything. So is there a step in between that?
Well, there's no division.
So this is where we started discussing. And I'm not saying there's a division. And we started talking a little bit about this when I was talking about acupuncture. You have yin and yang, but it's all encompassed as one. But yet, yin and yang are separate meridians. Again, I'm going to talk about Chinese medicine. They're separate meridians. That does not dismiss that they're all part of one. So if you think about that, and we say we're physical and we're energetic. So the physical we can all understand is the projection of out there. But what's that part of us that's non-physical, that's energetic? And then he talks about consciousness. So you would think that we are made up of two parts. Of course, it's encompassed. I know you're going to say it's all part of one. Yes. However, we have an energy and a physical. And I'm trying to, in my mind, imagine the energetic being separate, but I know part of it, the unconscious. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I do see what you're saying, and what you're pondering is beautiful and brilliant, because as you're sitting here pondering that, I'm kind of propelling in the moment and going, wow, you're completely corroborating with Neville Goddard here in the concept. And so you're actually giving us a boilerplate understanding of how our mind can perceive and understand this by conceptualizing. So in the conceptualization is the understanding, yet not the division. So in the conceptualization of all the parts that you described is the understanding. And it's kind of like bad example, but I like to go to the vacuum cleaner. You can take it all apart and look at everything and say, wow, this must do this, this must do that, and this must do this. Yet when it runs all together, you can, kind of ideally understand how it works. Yet each part, when you ascertain it conceptually, gives you a clearer, deeper understanding of its connection to the whole and how the whole is.
Sure.
And so the conceptualization of it, you filled in a huge hole there for some people, and even, to propel from, because the conceptualization of those parts gives you a better understanding of the consciousness as a whole.
So, because I can relate to consciousness as, again, I'm going to Jung. Consciousness is what you're aware of. That would be your surroundings. Your subconscious is almost like your energetic system within your body that works with you and works with a higher. And then you have the unconscious, which is what he's referring to as I am. Well, and I don't know if we can ever...
kind of the superconscious or sometimes
exactly,
there's a derivative.
Exactly. That's why I don't want to get caught in the vocabulary, right. But I'm trying, and that's why I kind of use yin and yang, and then the whole...
Well, sometimes people use subconscious and unconscious exchangeable.
Exactly.
So you're knowing that the conscious is working with the subconscious, or however that works.
So without getting caught in the vocabulary, because I'm trying to give examples of what I'm trying to say, but I'm not trying to define it, give it a word per se. It's interesting because you get to such a point that you have to almost create vocabulary to further your conversation. Right. And so I'm not trying to do that, but it's interesting because he talks about I am, and I thought It's almost like on a tri-level. I am part of everything. That's the connection to everything. I'm going to say I am God. We all are God. That's my connection with the I am, that I am, that I am. But then you have the energetic me that is like, knows a little bit more, it's like your soul would be kind of like the soul that someone would have. And then you have the physical me, which has what we would think of as limited belief, limited knowledge. But that, of course, can be argued as well, because if you have access to all of it, right? But I'm not delineating three separate entities. It's all one, is in three parts. And that's what when I was looking at his, and he talked about consciousness. That's why when he said he defines consciousness as I am. And I know what he's saying, but it's like, sometimes I think about it, it's like there's three levels.
Well, all those other things are manifestations within the concepts.
Exactly. So if you say that, just think of the soul level. Your soul is also a manifestation of a belief. So we just think, when we think of like manifesting something, what you believe, we think of like outside, right? I'm, like he said, I'm a man, I'm a singer, I live here, I do this, right? But I'm not saying, it's just that's what I'm getting. Like, wow. So even our soul, because again, I'm trying to find the vocabulary. Our soul is a manifestation of the bigger I am.
And again, wouldn't that be a concept?
Exactly.
I mean, if it all fits into the concept.
But I'm just saying, who would ever, I never thought, but from when I read with him, it's almost like your soul is just connected to which it is. But your soul has a little bit of everyone's a little bit different, even at their soul level.
But it's still I am.
Exactly.
Everything is still I am.
But to me, that was like an interesting concept, that your soul was a concept of an idea from where? You know what I mean?
Consciousness.
From consciousness.
Which
so it's
is
like
all that
the
is.
God, like God's isn't that interesting? That's all I don't have an answer. It's just when I thought about that in his definition of consciousness, and again, not the vocabulary, but we can almost see ourselves as a person, and then grander, we're energy, as you said, we're energy. And I can use the word soul again, I don't have a better word for it, but we can all sort of understand your soul lives beyond the physical. And yet your soul does become part of that I am. That I am. That's why that kept staying with me, that I am. But the soul is not the ultimate, is not like I don't know how to say it, like your leader. It's not the all. Yet we think of our soul, we think of our higher selves, and we think of, I don't know how else
it's all
to explain.
one. We're all one. It's
Absolutely.
like Russian dolls.
Exactly.
We're all one.
But each Russian doll, and I know they just open up in another one, but it's almost like each level of you has more information to it, has more substance to it. I don't know the best. Again, I'm struggling.
It's always connected, and it's always
absolutely.
I am.
But isn't that? I'm just thinking the soul. We always think as the soul as being when you manifest, and when we talk about how you arrange it, your soul was also arranged. We're both women living in the United States, and blah blah blah. But even our souls were arranged, because he talks about the arrangement defines what you see, right? He says in the state of consciousness of the individual is found the explanation of the phenomena of life. It's the state of the consciousness of the individual, which is almost like your soul. And so I guess all I'm trying to say for me, which when I read this, I was like, your soul was actually a manifest. It's been structured the same way we're talking about the person, which is kind of interesting to me. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I never thought about that. I don't know. Maybe
what's very beautiful to me is that in any concept at all, it's still the expression of I am.
It is.
So in any concept, however far you want to drill down, wherever you want to go, it's still the epitome and intensity of I am.
Okay, so the one thing I want to make mention that is going to come up later is when we talk about the arrangement of the concept, the arrangement. I'm going to constantly ask you, is it the physical mind? Is it the spirit? Is it the soul mind? Or is it in the all mind? And so if you want to manifest something.
But there's no difference. It's all I am.
Okay.
And it's in the delineation of the concept of which one it is, you make the difference.
So interesting enough, if you do it on the physical level, if I sit here and in my mind imagine a lot of money coming, right? Money will come. But what if I do it in a higher level? If I don't focus on just a physical, and we started talking and we're going to jump ahead to feeling. Feeling is working on a soul level because it's more than the physical. So that's almost like your soul. If you're going to make a change feeling-wise, it would be at that, I'm going to call it, again, soul level. You can't do it in the...
But who are you to say that?
I'm not...
You're I am, but who are you to say it? How do you know that when you give this expression of a physical, affirmation or whatever you're saying and it's going to occur, how do you know it happened through the physical? How do you know how or just purely it happens through I am?
I don't. I could never prove that. I just find it an interesting concept that it's like if you can do it at a higher level, you'd have a bigger effect.
Yet I also think what you're bringing up, which is very important, is that you are bringing up the fact that, in all these ancient text podcasts that we're doing, all these aspects are striated out and divided. And, do mantras, do affirmations, do this. You got to use this, you got to use that. But they're all connected. So who's to say? It's still I am. I mean, that's what he's saying. It's still consciousness. So who's to say what it is that works? And if you stay in that frame and that vortex of just consciousness, I mean, that's pretty powerful.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.